the main character says that marriage is the graveyard of all hopes. From the very beginning, this phrase did not have such a negative connotation. It used to be just a sentence from a very famous poem. And now everything has changed. For him, marriage was not joy and happiness, but the main problem of his life. Family life was not convenient for him, especially when his wife left all the worries to him. The relationship between husband and wife was getting worse. It is necessary to pretend to be nice and kind, and as a result, disgust even for one's own children begins to arise. And the main character got tired of living in such a hell, and that is why he is going to continue to live the life of a bachelor and watch his acquaintances. But one girl still wanted to marry him. The boy was very interested in what drove her when she wanted it. The carefree and happy life he had was about to end soon. After all, the girl tried with all her might to tighten him. But she told the real motive later. It was all about the fact that she wanted to put him on her knees in front of her. His future wife was known throughout the empire for her desire for dominance and cruelty. Again, he had a strange dream in which he was holding the hand of a girl with white hair. She was ready to marry him. But every time at this very moment, he woke up from a dream and a strange feeling haunted him for a long time. He had this strange dream for several months in a row. In it, he constantly makes an offer to an unfamiliar strange girl. Although it was just a dream, it seemed that it was a profit for him in something. But the hero constantly reassured himself. After all, the offer of a hand and a heart were simply unacceptable for him and contradicted the principles of his life. Plans for their future did not see a woman next to them. A servant called him through the door. He asked if Master Raven was already awake. The guy said that the servant could enter the room. A man with gray hair and a mustache looked into the boy's quarters. He asked the owner how he slept that night. Raven wondered if there was anything that could please the man. Dvoretsky said that the host is very perceptive, and it is impossible to hide anything from him. The man joked back and said that his father wanted to see Raven. The boy replied that he would come as soon as he was ready. This happened very quickly, because his father was not distinguished by a benevolent character and good nature. The old nobleman looked sternly at his son who had visited. The man offered to sit down and immediately get down to business. The father said that he wanted his son to marry Princess Charlene. Rainwin thought his father was playing a joke on him, but it was not like that. The aristocrat chose her precisely because she was born into a family of dukes, healers, and they are responsible for healing and cleansing the entire empire. And on the other hand, his family also belonged to the family of dukes. His family became famous for constantly fighting monsters and suffering on the battlefield with them. Also, such a union would be very good for both glorious families and would complement and create harmony. Therefore, there was no point in doubting the reason for which his wife was chosen. Everything was clear at first glance. But there was one problem. He thought of a strange girl with black hair who was known for her cruelty. She made all the men who dared to connect their lives with her cry and suffer. The fame of her preferences had long since spread throughout the empire and attracted the attention of many aristocrats. And although Raven did not personally meet Princess Charlene, she was a very famous person in the empire. Lady was famous for her beauty and charm, but the character remained bad and wanted to be better. Everyone knew the story when the youngest son of a famous noble family offered her his hand and heart, and the princess showed her middle finger and chased him away. She herself felt that he was only worthy of the role of a dog next to her. This girl just hates men and boys, and that's why few people still want to connect their future with her. After all, if the applicant refuses, he will become a laughingstock in the upper world of aristocracy and court servants. So Raven asked her father if she was ready to marry him and if the matter had been discussed before, without his involvement. But at the same time, if the princess made men cry, then Raven also possessed the hearts and souls of girls, daughters of noble families. And this opposite could only prevent such two different people with such ambitious characters from being in a relationship. They were known to everyone throughout the empire. And often, parents were afraid to even introduce them to their successors. Instead of a friendly conversation, their meeting could end in violence and murder. The father assured that everything had already been decided, and there were only formalities remaining. After all, it was Her Majesty's order. The Duke did not pursue anything personal in this case. And this time, Raven couldn't break the deal before the ceremony itself, as it happened to him before. The boy asked why because, like his father, he loved free relationships, and he was not ready to be with someone alone, with whom he would live his whole life. Wen directly said that he did not want to get married and limit himself. Herzog said that this was no reason to give up the marriage, and if he still decides to break the agreement and the marriage, the consequences will be catastrophic. And the last argument was that in this case, the Duke would be forced to give Raven's sister for the old Marquis L. This man was a very ugly and unkempt old man. Despite everything, he loved young girls and relationships with them. This old man was a pervert and a bully to all young girls. The boy felt sorry for his sister, this delicate flower who could fall into the clutches of an old pervert. They had a very big age difference. From the outside, it could give the impression that a father is walking with his child. And why does the Duke have such an unbridled desire to please Her Majesty? After all, this man never did just that without benefit for himself. And when the Duke was talking about what awaits Raven in the event that he does not want to sacrifice his sister's life, a butler looked into the room. He asks to forgive him for interrupting the conversation, just as Princess Sharon arrived. The boy asked how soon the princess would arrive at their domain. The butler replied that she was already in the palace and waiting to meet him. Also, you should hurry so as not to anger the princess and make her nervous. The servant replied that he had led the girl to the gazebo in the garden, where she was waiting for young Pevin. The boy realized that his father had not told him everything during the meeting. Until the very end, he did not know the whole truth. But there was nowhere to look. It is worth acting. Charlene stood among the flowers and greenery of the garden. She was different from all the girls with whom Raven was familiar. But he was moved by the fact that the figure of the princess was very similar to the girl he constantly saw in the street. The resemblance was so great that he had an involuntary desire to ask if the girl from his dream had visited him, but it was by no means possible. Today they met for the first time. He recommended himself. The girl replied that it would be better to sit down and drink a cup of tea. The girl's gaze gave the impression that she was completely made of ice. I was afraid of her impenetrability and seriousness. But she was not as bad as people said. He assumed that there was an opportunity to agree with her on how the future life of the young people would take place. Wen asked what the princess thought about their future marriage. But why did she think that at all? Charlene thought and eventually answered that she did not mind it at all. But the boy did not believe her. After all, a girl who hated men and boys fiercely could not think like that. And he asked, why did she choose him for this job? The girl abruptly stood up from her seat. Wen did not expect this. The princess replied that her desire was to bring him to his knees before her and answer for all the insults he had inflicted on girls and deceived women. The boy suddenly grabbed her hand, but he came to his senses in time because he dared to contradict the princess herself. The girl replied that the rumors about his behavior turned out to be simple gossip. After all, he did not behave like a man and a lover, but like an ordinary puppy that got its freedom. This made her want to tease him even more. The boy wondered what was wrong with Her Majesty. After all, the behavior was generally surprising and disturbing. She clearly had an unusual plan for him. He decided to move on to another topic. Wen said he was against their marriage. He also hoped that her position was the same as his, and that's why he was interested in the real reason why she wanted to marry him. After all, there were still many glorious families in the empire. The answer stunned the Duke's son. The girl directly answered that she likes him, and that's why she decided to make an offer herself. And Wen thought about how often he had heard that phrase from girls. It was after this that confessions of sincere and undying love were to follow. But true feelings, hidden behind politeness and kindness, had very strange forms and presented themselves differently in nature. Very often, he came across young ladies and women who believed that marrying him would solve their problems. The ladies often talked about safety, what marriage with Refn will give them. After all, he had a lot of money, which was enough for the rest of his life, as well as the influence and prospect of one day becoming Duke in place of his father. But the boy's beauty was also an important factor for young girls, and everyone agreed as soon as it came up, and it wouldn't be bad to make him your husband by marrying yourself. But the boy's will was above all else. As a result of many experiences, the boy believed that people do not change at all, and Princess Estrella and her entourage were sent away by him last time. He perfectly understood that such a person would not be able to make him happy. Now he also could not fully believe in the motives of the princess. Why did she choose such a way to get closer to the Duke's family, which was very necessary in matters of the future election of the ruler? And why exactly marriage had to become a tool? But no matter what, she will not be able to marry him. After all, Raven himself will be against losing his freedom. He firmly decided that he would not marry, but would remain a bachelor. Besides, why take as a wife a girl whom he does not love? He got up from the table and said that he had nothing to talk about with her, but it was clear from the look that the princess herself did not think so. The look of her cold eyes made you freeze in place and listen to everything she wanted to say to the interlocutor. But Raven was not affected. He apologized for his inappropriate behavior. But at the same time, he left the gazebo in which they were sitting with his prospective bride. The girl did not say a word, but simply looked after her. Ray Wen, walking along the path in the garden, thought about it. That the girl was extremely beautiful after all, and it was difficult to get her image out of my head just like that. But time will do everything for him. After all, he was definitely not going to meet her again. A girl with purple hair turned to the boy. She asked how he was feeling and how the situation was in general. The girl turned out to be one of the Duke's soldiers, that they fought monsters on the borders of their possessions. The soldiers reported that the unit, which was supposed to patrol the borderlands, engaged in a battle with monsters of a rather high rank. Raven thought that the training level of each warrior that was part of this squad was the highest among the entire army. Also, along with this, the monsters themselves no longer manifested themselves after the decisive battle that happened many years ago. Now you need to act urgently. He ordered to train new soldiers and go to help the detachment. A huge monster was rising above the treetops. The soldiers looked helplessly at the monstrosity because they had never met such a powerful enemy before. One of the leaders of the soldiers said that it is worth sticking to the captain's approach. At a crucial moment, when the warriors lost hope of victory, Raven came to the aid of his knights. With a powerful blow of a magical weapon, he forced the enemy to retreat and leave the people alone for a short time. It was worth being careful. The Duke's son himself praised the actions of the soldiers, adding that they behaved with dignity and did not dishonor the honor of their family and the army. But it was more interesting for everyone to see Raven live with his guardian power, which he showed only but. In the meantime, Raven was giving out orders to the soldiers who had come with him to help the wounded and check the surrounding woods for monsters that might be hiding in the thickets. In the future, he will command the operation independently. The girl reported that there were no casualties, but there were soldiers with serious injuries. But whether they will continue to live depends on how strong they will keep their defenses against the monsters now and give the mage a chance to heal them all. Ray Wen ordered one squad to go to the estate with the wounded and battle-damaged. It is there that they should wait for others who will return after defeating the monsters and their complete extermination. Flower petals began to swirl around. It seemed that a strange snow had begun. No one could figure out what happened. But suddenly the captain noticed the princess, a healer. He could not believe that she had come to his aid. The girl replied that after their conversation, she was going home when she accidentally overheard a conversation about monsters. And that's why she used teleportation in order to see everything with her own eyes and witness the majestic battle with the eternal enemy. They were interrupted by one of the soldiers. His body was completely covered in bloody miasma. The man asked for help. The princess ordered everyone to stay put. She herself will help the wounded and heal him. A bright purple light enveloped the soldier's body. The healing has begun. This procedure required concentration of a large supply of mana and saved the life of more than one warrior, defender. But the effect was impressive. The body of not only one soldier who asked for help was cleansed. One way or another, the wounds and all the damage on all the soldiers and warriors were healed. The princess said that this practice was developed many times ago by the shamans of her tribe. The healers were clearly skilled users of the magical energy given to humans by the gods, so that they could not only destroy and kill each other, or fight off hordes of monsters. Healers did good, but the princess possessed such tremendous power that she could change the course of the situation in a completely different direction in a matter of seconds. This is exactly what she was doing now. The soldiers became better compared to how they were right after the battle with the monsters. The monster, which had the shape of a healthy inverted drop, attacked the girl. Raven just managed to warn her about the danger. But Charlene was not lost. She folded her hands in front of her and not only defended herself, but also attacked at the same time. Everyone around looked in surprise at how the monster was lying at the feet of the princess. The girl saw surprised and confused looks, but calmly said that her hobby was killing monsters. A spot of blood was on her cheek. Soldiers from the detachment rushed to the captain. They could not believe that the girl had killed the monster with one slap. One of the soldiers asked if he was really hallucinating, or maybe he finally died and rested forever. Raven told everyone to calm down. He did not share his admiration for this girl. She was not unusual for him. Her fighting skills remained average and nothing amazing. But Charlene promised to always protect the prince. The girl tightly held the hand of her future groom. The demonstrated strength, in her opinion, should have inclined him to choose her as a bride. The princess was not going to give up on what she planned and tried in every possible way to implement her plan. The weather was gorgeous outside. The boy saw it through the carriage window. His mood was spoiled because he was on his way to the place of his death. After all, through the public offer of Ms., he had no right to refuse Estella. That day his life changed dramatically. Everyone around told him that he simply had to marry that girl, and wherever he went, everyone was talking about the fact that he should have taken her as his wife. Even sitting in his office and working with documents, he received hints about the upcoming wedding. Along with advice on how to normalize your working day, there were posts about his future marriage to Estella everywhere. The knights from his ranks became devoted followers of this princess and pressured him to make the right decision. And he had only two alternatives, either marriage or death. The third is not given. Ray Wen thought that the magic power was supposed to heal. Healers had exactly such a profile. They have passive skills. It remained a mystery how Estella could kill the monster. The divine power was the ability to fight monsters. The powers of the healers were of divine origin and were supposed to heal from wounds and miasms. But it was radically different from the magic that anyone who wanted to, who had the money and free time to do so, could master. The situation was really strange. Only the descendants of the two great ducal families could wield this mighty power. These families were the Seumgo family Raven and the family of his future wife, the family of Charlene. But before that, there was no one who could combine both skills. Of course, there was once a saint who could use both powers and protect the lands of the empire. However, this happened in ancient times, when their country was just appearing on the map of the continent. But too much time has passed since then. The young man received a letter that mentioned the possibility of a marriage contract. He immediately understood who could offer such a deal. But the girl had her own goal, and she firmly followed this path to the final result. After returning to the castle, Raven visited the girl. He apologized for being late. The girl did not expect such a turn of events. She looked at the boy in surprise. He behaved confidently and carried himself with dignity. She assured that nothing terrible had happened because she herself had recently arrived. She liked it here because the atmosphere was good. Therefore, the girl was happy to wait for him in this place. Estella waits for the prince to tell him. He replied that he was ready to invite her to this cozy place again, and the tea that the girl enjoyed was bought once a season. He also recommended a delicious dry sugar cake. His sister also praised the place. It was popular among girls, but it is worth going straight to the point. The princess agreed and immediately said that her condition would be that she would be the first to fight the demons. Refusal was not accepted. As for other conditions, their marriage will be considered valid until his title becomes official, and then she will refuse his property and inheritance and will not want to receive the title of duchess. She was interested in something completely different in this aspect. The boy could not believe what he heard. After all these conditions were very beneficial for him. The young man felt some kind of danger, and was preparing for the fact that some concessions would be demanded from him as well. However, nothing like that happened. But Raven did not believe what he heard. He expected the deception to begin. This girl was famous for hating men, but he still became more and more curious over time why the princess chose him as her future husband. For the sake of her goal, she even dared to deceive him, saying that she loved him. There was no need to lie about her feelings if she was openly willing to enter into a marriage contract. She did not give the impression that she was ready to humiliate herself. Contract marriage did not always have to be signed by both parties. But on the other hand, with the support of the extraordinary power of the princess, his soldiers will be able to fight monsters better, and they will risk their lives less. Ray Wen understood that he would definitely not extract a contract or agreement that was more profitable for himself from the girl. Therefore, he agreed to such a contract. He had no choice but to accept all the conditions and pay accordingly. The girl replied that she was glad to conclude the agreement on such terms. But in the end, she said that there are rumors that she plays with human feelings and men's hearts. Love and affection did not exist for her. It was simply foreign to the princess. But the duke's son asked how she would react to him taking a mistress while they were married. He will not be able to make her happy. Will she regret marrying such a person? After all, it is difficult for him to deny himself. The girl remained silent. It was difficult to understand what she was thinking about and what she felt deep in her soul. However, the look meant that her thoughts were mixed, and it is difficult for her to agree, but circumstances force her to do so. The princess remembered the death of all her relatives. She could no longer bother with small matters because she was very tired. She was standing in front of the grave of her relatives, and the understanding of transience and everything to come left her. The girl answered firmly and confidently that she would not regret agreeing to make a deal with him at the moment. Raven assured that everything would be fine once they were both happy with what they had agreed upon. The guy said that he had already agreed, and it was time to sign the contracts. The signature of the princess remained. And everything will be ready. The girl thought that outwardly the young man gave the impression of a kind and decent guy who told everything openly. But at the same time, he did not allow to cross the limits that he himself set. He knew exactly the price of his words and promises. His cold gaze was hidden behind a sincere smile, but all this made even the princess to be alert. Estella thought that if she had been in such a position, she would probably have drawn up a contract on such terms herself. The suspicious man caused a corresponding reaction in her, but there was a good reason for them to be together. And now she has the opportunity to continue implementing her plan. Mana energies began to play around her mouth. The girl understood that she managed to control the situation now and play her part accordingly. The guy took her hand and asked her to stop, because he did not fully understand what his potential wife was doing now. But she calmly replied that she signed the contract with the help of magic. There was nothing strange in this case. But Raven could not calm down. He questioned why the girl did this. He threatened that if the princess violates the conditions they have reached, then she will answer for all her sins in the full program and magic will not help her. At that moment, the girl understood what her future husband's true face was. He held the girl's hand tightly. In fact, he gave the impression that he was always cold and that it was difficult to reveal him to the truth, with whom he linked his entire future. But he realized that he was doing something inconsistent with what they had agreed on earlier. The boy tried to pull himself together and behave like an aristocrat. The girl asked why he behaved like that, because absolutely nothing depended on what method she used, and all conditions and obligations will not suffer from this at all. Raven agreed with her. It was awkward to answer. She said he had previously asked if she had any regrets, and now I am ready to answer this question. The boy was surprised at how easily Estella moved from one question to another. And why is she not concerned with this issue at all? The princess gently took the boy's chin. Now she was sure that the boy would fall in love with her. After all, it was very easy to do with such an immature young man as he was. Raven didn't understand what they wanted from him. Estella laughed. She was very amused by the situation, but she promised that in the future there is no need to expect any surprises and gifts from her that could worsen the life or threaten the dignity of the prince. But he was still confused by the phrase that he should have fallen in love with her. It was his choice to be afraid or nervous, but he definitely couldn't play with such things. And this phrase she said to him for the first time. No one in the palace could believe that the prince and princess would get married. Public opinion considered them to be completely different people, completely opposite to each other. But the gossip was not false, because both of them had already been seen together. One of the maids reminded that everything should be ready for the wedding by next week. Apartments for the newlyweds must also be prepared, and that's why everyone in the castle will have a lot of work to do in the coming days. This should not be doubted. The servants, especially the girls, were happy that the priest, they will have a mistress. After all, everyone believed that with the appearance of a woman in the estate, their affairs would go better, and it also meant that one of the maids would be made a personal servant of the new mistress. But many still thought that everything in the estate would remain as it was before. After all, the arrival of a new member of the ruling class could cause unwanted changes in the order that had been established here decades before. Everyone around was talking about the girl who was with the young Master Raven. She was his lover. However, everyone was more interested in whether the future bride, Princess Charlene, knew about this girl. After all, in this way it will gain completely different momentum. The owner of the palace was reading something in his office. It was late, but someone knocked on the door of his room. It was a girl whose face and upper body were covered by a sheet. Raven was happy about this visit and replied that he had been waiting for her for a long time. He asked the girl how she got here and if no one had seen her arrive. The girl's name was Catherine. She was a red-haired beauty with aristocratic features. She replied that everything is fine and no one noticed her. Her arrival is a secret. There was a pile of papers on the table. The girl looked at them in surprise. The young man replied that now Catherine can rest, and he should have finished working on the documents and will pay attention to her. He asked to wait for his girlfriend. The girl suddenly grabbed the boy's hand. The girl turned out not to be a girl at all. The person said that he arrived here disguised as a girl. As it turned out, it was a man. He wondered why he had to change clothes in order to be healed. Ray Wen said that the boy was barely recognized that day, so the conspiracy was worth sticking to. But now it is necessary to do business, because there was no more time. Soon the servants will start scurrying through the palace corridors again. The young owner was lying on the bed, half undressed. A stranger in women's clothing stood over him with an outstretched hand. The healing process was again carried out in secret from everyone who did not know about its necessity. But suddenly, knights from his squad entered the room. They wondered if their commander was okay. Although it was late, they dared to go to him. Raven was nervous about the unexpected visit from his soldiers. He was afraid of rumors that would once again spread through the palace. There was nothing left but to become naked and bend over the night guest, pretending that now was the time for them to be intimate. He angrily said that he was a bit busy at the moment, and now is not the time to bother him. Well, they have to get away. The knights were surprised by this behavior of their commander. They definitely did not expect to see their captain next to the girl, and also with such a strange appearance. They apologized for the unexpected visit. Raven was embarrassed to stand over his comrade in such a position, but he asked to do something for him, even if the request sounds completely inconvenient. Confused, the man asked what exactly his friend wanted from him. The captain asked for help to hide the fact that he needed treatment from everyone, and he involved Keith in this scam in this way. It was necessary to follow all the recommendations of the healer, and the first thing he should do is lie down in bed. Adherence to the regimen was an important factor in future treatment, but Raven was ready to obey all the orders of his healer, if only all these procedures would have an effect. After all, physical health was very important to him. The Duke's son was sitting in bed. The energy of healing magic raged around him. The healer himself asked his ward how he was feeling. The young man replied that he is much better because he is being treated. Raven's well-being improved. He no longer felt sick. His condition improved day by day, and he felt very good, but the partner knew that he was lying. Since childhood, Raven was distinguished by straightforwardness, but not the ability to lie and deceive. Before that, Kate was a very skilled magician and could read human behavior like no other. He pretended to believe the captain and played along with him. However, he did not retreat from his goal. Healing the Knight Commander was his first priority. He imposed a more powerful healing spell each time, but it did not help more than the previous ones. Ray Wen thought that even if he forbade the mage to use the magical energy of the gods, the healer would still not obey him. Only direct descendants of his ducal line possessed the skills to cast healing seals on people, and such people actually possessed a powerful healing power. She did not even compare with the current healers who could cope with more or less light wounds and injuries. One person from the former family of the Dukes of Dyer could destroy 100 monsters with a single movement of his right hand. It is precisely because of his former power that it is difficult to treat his injuries, which were not fatal or too dangerous. Ray Wen actually owned such a seal. He hid his power, although he knew that the use of magical power would lead to a fatal end to his life. But he will still use force little by little to protect his people. After all, such power cannot be neglected when the lives of hundreds of thousands of people depended on you. As a result, he risked his life to protect the defenseless and needy. Behind these thoughts, he did not notice the time. Kate was surprised by the boy's stubbornness. However, nothing could be done about it. He noted that Kate's words are the opposite of his actions, and this does not bode well for the Grand Duke's future endeavors and affairs. The day has come. Dvoretsky escorted Raven. He told the owner, "Such a beautiful day has come." The Duke's son asked Henry not to repeat this for the 100th time this morning, but the servant could not shut up. Everyone was waiting for this moment for a long time. The butler was crying. It was unusual for him to marry his former pupil. He still hasn't gotten used to the fact that Raven is no longer a little boy, not the little Duke he's nursed in his arms since he was a boy. Grimly following Henry, Raven asked him to do what he always did, but the servant replied that an old man like him would finally feel relieved that his beloved, though not his own son, would finally not die of loneliness. The butler was surprised when Raven spoke of the straightforwardness of the girl who would become his wife. He did not expect to hear such a thing from his pet. The man said he couldn't believe his little boy had grown up so fast. And he was also glad that his pupil praised the girl for her good qualities and uniqueness. This was already something new for Raven. The young man asked if the butler had heard him. It seemed strange to him in which part of the conversation he praised Estella. The boy was surprised by how Henry reacted to his words. In the top of strange and true girls who talk about their intentions, Estella would be the first in the top. She immediately told about the goal of bringing him to his knees. It seemed strange to him that he was about how she would behave with a boy or a man that she really liked. It would be a very interesting sight, but that didn't make it so painful to think about. Raven also caught himself on this one. Meanwhile, the princess was riding in a carriage. She was reading a book alone, which talked about how to make an unapproachable person fall in love with you. It was there that she found the point that it is worth making a very correct and unforgettable first impression in order to remember the partner. The second step was to demonstrate one's strengths and skills. That's exactly what she did when she moved to the forest and dealt with the monster that was attacking the squad of knights on her own. This point was also fully implemented and came true to the letter. The third step was to spend time alone to normalize my thoughts and actions. To do this, you should close the door and think about everything that happened in the near future. The next thing was to lock myself in a room alone with Raven. But it seemed strange to her that this person was treating her like a wild animal, and his behavior confused her. It seemed to her that he was too closed for her, although in the near future they were to become quite close people. And about being left alone with him in a closed room, it was probably out of the question. He will avoid it at all costs. And trying to tie him up, would that solve the situation for both of them? All in all, it should have been a good idea, and you need to think about it. But wasn't it too much? She knew about love and love only from the romance novels she read in her spare time. Maybe she should have arrived a little earlier. Finally, the carriage with the princess arrived at the Duke of Dyer's palace. The servants and aristocracy of the palace met Estella and welcomed her because she was soon to become their new mistress and mistress. The girl herself did not understand this until the end. Raven himself went out, accompanied by a butler, to greet his wife. Everyone around rejoiced that their young master would finally become a married man. This should also soften his temper. The young man picked up the girl in his arms, who had not even had time to get out of the carriage. The girl did not expect such a reaction. She looked at him carefully, thinking about the reasons for such a transformation of the ardent bachelor. What could have happened that he changed so much? In the evening, Raven asked Henry what was the reaction of those around him to his marriage with Princess Estella. The servant did not know how to properly formulate an opinion. He replied that those who have been working here for many years are happy about such a union. On the other hand, many young people who served in the palace were from the capital. For them, the gossip about Her Majesty was well known, and they worried about their young master because he could fall under the influence of the princess and be offended by her. However, most doubted that the princess could harm the young man in any way. Henry asked what exactly was confusing his pet, but the boy asked what other gossips and moods are going around in the palace. After all, the same thing always happened. Has anyone heard of the servants about the Duchess of Dyer? After all, she was a beautiful flower that conquered the hearts of men from the most noble families of the empire. But the Duke seemed to hate his wife for this very reason. And living with such a woman was considered a disgrace by everyone around. However, most could only imagine what the Duke felt at such moments. It was amusing that so many men had the deepest feelings for the Duchess, and her husband couldn't do anything about it. But the man she loved could not love her back. Ray Wen remembered everything he remembered from his childhood about his mother. It was then that the first Ron opened in his heart, when he met his mother's bad and cold attitude towards him. Now he was interested in what the servants in the palace said about his marriage. But even if everything was fine, it seemed that the princess was not very good at communicating. Making acquaintances and communicating with people was her thing. The young duke ordered that no one else suspicious should be allowed to enter the palace. At the same time, he asked that the princess's leisure time be well organized, without any kind of danger. Her free time had to be organized and filled with emotions. In his opinion, the play was supposed to start soon, so it's worth getting ready. Ray Wen escorted the girl to the palace. Servants bowed around. The young duke asked how his bride was doing. To begin with, he said that you should rest in your room and recharge your batteries before the evening. Behind him, the servants were watching the couple. They could not understand the changes that had happened to their ruler. For them, it was strange how the owner behaved. But everyone agreed that the young people were a very nice couple. The guy led the girl to his room. They were guided by the attentive eyes of servants and court aristocracy. Everyone was wondering how this marriage situation would end, because before everything ended very quickly. The newlyweds' thoughts were also very strange for such an occasion. The guy said he even forgot how to breathe. And the girl replied that these were her words, and she should calm down. Most of it was only in thoughts, and only a part was voiced. Estella said they needed to talk. Raven agreed with her. He even made a plan of what they were going to talk about, and to begin with, he cast a spell that isolated the room from eavesdropping. Now they could speak freely. The distance between them was huge. The girl asked if he really meant it when he talked about some distance in the relationship. She said he was too far away from her to start a conversation. Estella added that she doesn't bite, and that's why the young man could come closer to her. But Raven replied that it was convenient for him to talk to his bride from there, and everything was fine with him. The girl decided that she should take the situation under her control. She came closer and took the initiative in the conversation. The girl called him Mr. Puppy, and he thanked for the attention to his person and called her Miss Evil in return. These nicknames suited them very well. Their conversation on the side could have the appearance of a battle between a dragon and a tiger. The energy was bubbling between these two. The girl thought that the boy was too angry with her, and the Duke, in turn, understood why none of the boys received anything from her at all. The only thing that was good for Estella in the boy was his cute face. However, everything else was very strange and repulsive. She asked if he planned to continue talking to her about the subject. Raven said, "Who wants to talk about the gossip that people spread around their relationship?" But these rumors were not based on anything concrete, and were of an abstract nature. No one really knew anything about their love affairs and affairs. And then he broached the subject of her mistreatment of all suitors for her hand and heart. It was unpleasant for the girl to hear this addressed to her. It was, of course, better than the fact that he could treat her badly and not support the girl's endeavors. Rayan asked if she didn't like such gossip. The girl thought that the guy was saying this to her, but at least this was not a bad attitude towards her. And Raven asked if she was okay with that. After all, it could affect honor and dignity. Wouldn't she feel uncomfortable if bad gossip and rumors spread about her? And if she fell in love with him without memory, but everyone around would say that this is not true at all? Wouldn't that be unfair to her and her actions and feelings? It was important that the boy could trust her and not listen to everyone around with their advice and questions. Here, Raven added that it was as if they were entering into a contract, but he himself chose to take her as his wife and stay together. And that is why it is important for him that there are no rumors and gossip about their wedding and marriage. And then, Estella began to guess about the real reason why he behaved like that in public. The young man tried to protect her from gossip. For him, it was something heroic and noble. But for her, there was nothing unusual in this. She did not care about the opinion of the surrounding servants and servants. In reality, this act remained insignificant and unnecessary for her. But she still remained the only one who expected manifestations of kindness and concern for her from his side. Estella was sure that the young man would not want to insult her and somehow neglect her. It was still a mystery to her, but a fact. The girl said that he was actually kind and sensitive. For her comfort, Raven was willing to make certain sacrifices for his love. Or he was actually an idiot who tried to use cheap tricks to fall in love with himself and take advantage. The guy hugged his bride. He asked if her program included at least spending the night with him. Estella was confused by such a question. She didn't expect anything like this from this boy. He was not such a simpleton as he seemed at first glance. Meanwhile, the commander of the second squad, Captain Daniel, was looking at this whole scene. He couldn't believe that his commander had treated the girl like that. But Raven quickly chased away all curious observers. He sent them to train. The woman was ahead of the captured commanders of the soldiers. She asked her friends if they could still hear the crap they heard in the hall, or if the crap had blocked their ears. She was the commander of the third squad. Her name was Asher, and she was almost no different from the soldiers. Her comrades went and still talked about how their commander and Estella were not really in love with each other. No one was interested in this, but the boy liked to talk about various topics and discuss gossip and rumors about others. This young boy was the commander of the first squad of knights, and his name was Teo. He was the youngest commander, but his skill left no one in doubt about his abilities and skills as a professional soldier. At the entrance, the soldiers were already talking about the fact that they should soon receive an answer to all their questions. And now it was not worth listening to the commander, because his punishment will be much more cruel than anything that happened to them before. On the way out, the soldiers realized that some kind of magic had definitely been cast on the building. They could not hear anything, and their organs seemed to refuse to feel and convey information from sensors to the brain and from other sense organs. One of the knights said it was very similar to a soundproof spell. This was usually used by their commander when he wanted something to remain a secret and not become public knowledge. The knight opened wide the door to the room where their leader was currently with his bride-to-be. The soldier asked an inappropriate question about what their commander had forgotten. No one around appreciated the joke. Everyone watched in silence, waiting for Raven's reaction. The soldiers understood why the young owner chose to hide in broad daylight from the eyes of all kinds of curious observers. They saw Raven hugging the girl. Together with Estella, he looked in surprise at the uninvited guests who burst into the room. The soldiers begged to be excused for their intrusion. But the Duke himself was apparently not against the fact that his soldiers visited them. He tried to keep his soldiers from abandoning him, but Estella herself asked if he himself had called her here. Her Majesty said that the minimum program has not yet been completed. If a man invited a girl to visit him, then he had to take care of her and be by her side, because anything could happen to her. He did not want to leave her alone and run away. The young duke himself understood that he had always been in different situations with these boys. They could calmly walk and drink, and soon they could jump to meet the enemy and fearlessly fight monsters. That was what confused him. Approached Ravnea. He reported that everyone was confused by the fact that the ruler was angry for so long. He advised His Majesty to eat and drink more, and only then go exercise his muscles. But now it was not up to that. None of the ideas proposed to the nobleman by his subordinates interested him. Even the simplest option for solving the problem, proposed by the commander of the second squad, Daniel, who always relied on physical strength, did not like it. Theo was next. He offered his captain another way out of the situation. He asked an unexpected question about what the young duke would be doing when Her Majesty bore him a child. And it didn't matter to him who it would be, a boy or a girl. But now they did not have the kind of relationship that everyone thinks about. It is too early to talk about anything concrete. Raven thought to herself that she wouldn't want to be like her parents. After marriage, he planned to build a really happy family and provide his wife and child with everything they needed, and that they would not need anything. There was a time when he thought completely differently, but over time, everything changed. But one day, as a child, he went to the palace library. There, he found a book that interested him. It was about a person who possessed the seal of the keeper. The little boy read the book with interest, and a terrible understanding came to him. In the book, it was said that the price for his magical abilities would be a short life, but he could happily give it all up, just for the sake of his life. After all, it is scary to learn something like this at such an age. And what is the meaning then in everything that is happening? This information traumatized the little boy. Since then, doubts settled in him about the expediency of everything he was going to do in the future. The boy was afraid of death. He didn't want to think about what would happen in the future at all. After the ancestors founded the empire, monsters and miasms of various kinds began to appear. All this became a real punishment for the people who founded their state and sought only to live peacefully on their lands, won from nature. Since then, the entire continent has descended into the depths of chaos, and when everyone has already lost hope that life will become the way it was before. People could not plan and think about anything, but new hope and new expectations were lit up. A holy woman and a guardian knight came to help humanity. They came to the defense of humanity, and with joint efforts built a magical barrier around lands inhabited by humans. This is how they tried to protect themselves from the threat of monsters. And now people are protected by Charlene's family. It was the representatives of this glorious ancient family who were engaged in the purification and healing of soldiers and knights who fought against monsters. They opposed miasms and attackers. And the Dyer family provided powerful support in the fight against monsters, and also subjugated the will of people to creatures that could become useful in the lives of ordinary citizens. Conquering monsters has become too dangerous a business. The struggle took many lives. Knights and soldiers died in bloody skirmishes with the enemy. And so the participation of a princess with extraordinary healing powers would make raiding the monster's lair much easier and more effective. After all, the combat power of the unit would remain high, since the forces were not dispersed to protect wounded comrades or evacuate them from the battlefield. It would be much easier to deal with it. But unfortunately, Raven will not allow this. But at Estella's long persuasion, her fiancé did agree to take her with him one day and include her in a squad of soldiers. The knights talked about how their uniforms suited the princess. Everyone looked at the girl and Raven in surprise. The guy was nervous. But everyone around them rejoiced that a powerful healer was with them. Everyone around rejoiced that the princess joined the ranks of the defenders. The trust in her and the love of the people were guaranteed to her 100%. People rejoiced at such a beautiful couple. Therefore, it is necessary to develop a plan for further actions. The soldiers had no doubt that this trip and the subsequent raid were going to be quite interesting and productive. The prince said that now their main task will be the maximum destruction of monsters. Raven told the girl to stay close and not come forward. After all, it was not just a walk, but a military raid on enemy territory. He tried to instruct the princess for a long time, but it was already clear that she would not listen to him. The soldiers remembered how the princess had destroyed the monster with one movement of her hand. They also believed that with one movement she could not only protect herself, but also defeat the attacker. Her abilities were unique. Also, she can calmly attack the monster together with them. But it will be very difficult for her to attack and heal their backs now. It is also worth deciding on the final goal and tasks in the squad of all its participants. For this, it is necessary to use the force of almost 100 people who would obey a single leader. The prince's voice was as cold as the winter wind. He asked his subordinates for a moment to calm them down and not say anything more into the void. The knights were afraid of his tone. After all, he predicted only problems and punishment. The princess examined the sleeve of her uniform. Meanwhile, Raven said that a support squad consisting of healers and medics would arrive with them a little later. However, he will not be too far behind the vanguard of monster hunters. In essence, this meant that support for them would again be postponed for a certain time. However, this was not news to veterans and experienced warriors. After all, it usually happened that way. Meanwhile, they will destroy monsters and other evil spirits that lived in the thickets. The girl from the detachment reported to the commander that the gate was ready for transfer. It is also worth gathering and preparing for departure. It could happen at any moment. Ray Wen replied that it was simply a wonderful job, and now it's time to go, without wasting time. The soldiers were ordered to gather around the gate and prepare to travel through the magical portals. The princess also had to finalize her equipment and go into battle with a squad led by her husband. Estella suggested returning to the topic of her direct involvement in fighting and killing monsters. The girl wondered why they really couldn't do that. The relationship between her and the groom gradually improved. Ray Wen did not deny that her participation in the raid would make their task much easier. After all, the mobile help of the healer would maintain the combat capability of the unit at a high level. Conquering monsters would be many times more productive. The knights around were talking about their fate if such a powerful healer was with them. They would not worry about dying in battle from the slightest wound. It was necessary to adhere to the agreement between two prominent houses of magicians, aristocrats. The captain himself was surprised when they got used to the idea of mobile support so quickly. Still, he supported the idea that cooperation is beneficial to both parties. Under the conditions, of course, of the protection of Princess Estella by the knights of the squad. Ray Wen smiled and asked how the girl herself felt about such an idea. She replied that she completely entrusts her life to him and believes that Duke Deer's son will protect her and prevent monsters from getting to her. The boy liked her trust. The captain of one of the squads of knights was simply delighted with today's hunt. He simply could not believe how much easier it had become with the support of a powerful healer. Today was actually fun. After all, thoughts hovered only around the battle. The knights around shouted loudly and welcomed the presence of the girl in their squad. Everyone was amazed at how the girl finished off the monster with one blow. The monster attacked the relief squad rushing to the battlefield. It was at this point that Estella defeated the creature. Many of the experienced soldiers who had gone through more than one battle were amazed that such a formidable enemy could be defeated with bare hands. In addition, the princess was very attentive to each participant in the battle. Raven himself agreed with it. Conquering monsters became much easier and more productive than the previous times. The girl apologized to the groom for the risky situation in which she got into. Estella said that the monster attacked her himself. She simply did not notice his appearance. The bride definitely did not want to stand out in any way. In addition, she was ashamed of the fact that she herself violated the terms of their agreement and became a violator and disobedient. But the Duke's son was not angry. He was glad that he managed to come to the rescue when the princess was attacked by a monster. But he was even more pleased with how well the situation with the monsters and hunting them had turned out. It became many times easier to do. Now the girl had to return to the support unit. There were reports that there were knights suffering from the deadly miasms that the monsters had infected them with. They also need help and support. The guy said that's all for today, but Estella did not let him go. She took his cloak and said she was ready to clean it herself. After all, the soldiers of the support unit will help the knights. Raven replied that it should not be done. In his opinion, the princess was very tired and needed rest, and he himself could deal with his problems after the battle. But the girl didn't care what he would say to her there. She decided that she should personally heal her fiancé. The duke's son had to put up with it. He humbly held out his hand and said that Estella could proceed, but Her Majesty thought she was being mocked. After all, during healing and cleansing, the area of the skin and body should be as open as possible for the effect. And if he understood her correctly and had no reason to refuse, she ordered him to undress completely. After all, the treatment of the squad commander was of primary importance for the entire operation. They were sitting on a bench. Raven was naked to the waist. The girl examined his entire body. In general, everything was fine, but at this moment it was felt that his magical energy was stagnant. Perhaps the reason was that he did not sleep well and did not rest enough for all his work. He needed more rest. The boy is embarrassed. He was not used to being treated this way. Estella jabbed her index finger into his chest. She herself had previously felt a certain discomfort around him. But recently, something has changed. Ray Wen asked to stop. Her Majesty thought about how many girls had been in love with him before. But what did he do to them? How did he break their hearts and hopes? It could traumatize so many people, and everyone around knew this very well. All the girls who fell in love with the Duke's son suffered from the fact that they dreamed of being in his arms at least once. There were rumors about the boy, both good and bad. However, they all had a certain ground under them and were based on something. Raven was often called a bad person. He didn't have an iota of respect for the girls he dated. For him, it was no more than ordinary entertainment. Even close and relatives looked askance at him because of his flirtations with girls and frivolity. But despite even the dirtiest rumors, he did not lose his popularity among girls. And at one time, Estella herself took all the rumors about him at face value. She was ready to believe that he was frivolous and irresponsible, but she was interested in one thing. The girl gathered her strength and asked what she had wanted to ask for a long time. She wondered if he was still a virgin. This question scared Raven himself. He definitely did not expect such a question. In response, he simply remained silent. At night, when everyone arrived at the palace, Estella was left alone with her fiancé. She was ready to do everything. The girl was standing over Raven in a nightgown. The boy was embarrassed. The princess also asked if it was his first time. The duke's son said that they should not rush and that they could talk first. But the girl was not going to stop. She asked if he was going to have a conversation with her about who knows what. This surprised and confused her. The boy was clearly afraid of what was about to happen. His fright was not staged, it was real. The young man asked to stop and not to continue, because he was worried about it. He definitely had to be a virgin, and the princess could be the first. The girl began to take off her nightgown. The strap slipped off her shoulders. He asked to stop and not to continue. Panic and fear reflected in his eyes. But it was too late. Her Majesty was more than serious. Kate was standing by the bed. Raven realized that it was all just a vision. He realized that he had fallen asleep. And everything that happened, he just dreamed. He said he was very glad that it was just a dream, because he was not ready for what the princess offered. The woman leaned over the commander. She asked if his new girlfriend found out he was a virgin. The boy was embarrassed, but the healer said that the circumstances under which it appeared were good, but he could be calm. Kate said that all the rumors and gossip about him being a womanizer and being so hard on girls were used by him to avoid marrying someone. He skillfully used his fame in order not to lose his freedom. It was a smart move. But now the need for this disappeared by itself after his marriage with the princess. So now it's worth taking care of your mind and opening all the cards. Raven agreed. After all, even now he was still a prisoner of his past. This should be avoided. The healer was surprised that he really had no sexual experience with anyone before this. That's why he screamed so loudly and tried to get away from her. And that's why it's worth keeping all this a secret. After all, the princess will use it. The guy rushed to Kate. He asked if nothing terrible would happen if she found out the whole truth about him. Raven tried to get an answer that would calm him down, but the woman said nothing. The tension grew. He was ashamed because the girl found out that he was a virgin. It could have been a real disaster for him. It is not known why this question was so painful for a boy of his position. However, he was very afraid of it. He did not know what to do in such a situation. And today the Duke's son tried his best to play the role of a heathen. The hope that Her Majesty would refuse him did not leave him. But it was already too late, and the time for talking had passed. There was a raid tomorrow. When Kate left Raven's room, she did not notice how a girl was looking at her from around the corner. Estella saw an unknown person coming out of her fiancé's room. Various thoughts swirled in her head. That girl was not lost. She is ready to act. Her Majesty was simply confused as to who the stranger was. And what did she do with her fiancé? It is impossible to draw sharp conclusions right away, although the situation gave the impression of being ambiguous and that everything was known from the very beginning. 2 weeks have passed since Estella moved to the Duke of Dyer's palace. Thanks to Raven's plan, her life was peaceful and secure. Their relationship reached the stage where they called each other by their first names, and this was already progress for them. So it seemed to the princess. However, observing the behavior of the groom, the girl could not think so 100%. Estella concluded that he would never truly love her, and fame about him does him a disservice. And this worried her as a wife. But the rumors, according to her, were half true. This worried her as his future chosen one. However, she still hasn't decided what to do with it. The issue was problematic and required a complex and deliberate approach so as not to break nonsense. The maid asked the princess why she was so restless. Estella replied that last night she had seen a girl or woman coming out of the Duke's son's room. Her Majesty asked if the servant knew anything about it and who this stranger might be. The girl asked to forgive her, but she really knew nothing about the visits of women and the night walks of her master. But the princess noticed on her hands that they were shaking, how the girl was worried. She simply let go of the servant, from whom she did not learn anything. Estella replied that a servant could be proud of his loyalty and deserved praise from his master. After all, she kept silent about what she knew, or about what everyone said, and did not say without the permission of her master. She has something to be proud of. And also, the princess thought about what loyal servants Raven had. Of course, there was no reason to be happy, but it is nice that your husband enjoyed such an undeniable authority among his subjects. The girl said that Miss Estella is not like the one that was rumored. The servant is sure that the young lady really loves Mr. Raven. Otherwise, she wouldn't have been able to make such a kind face when it came to her fiancé and the strange woman who walked around him at night and came out of the bedroom. The girl thought about the fact that Raven did not have a relationship with that stranger who had left his room last night. But even if she has a competitor, she does not want to lose to her in anything. This will be another challenge. After all, she definitely does not want to lose her image. She had the fame of a girl who was called the most cruel and arbitrary girl, who broke the hearts of men and used them like toys according to her whims. Estella looked at her reflection in the window and thought that in general, there was no one more beautiful and better than her. In this, she had a great doubt about it. Before that, it is worth using certain methods to return the position. A group of men were training in the yard. Raven was also among them. He said that after lunch they would continue training, and now it was time to rest and gather strength to continue training. Subordinates were not happy about it. The princess went out to the boys who were training. Raven said the girl didn't belong here. She replied that she just wanted to see. But the boy was wary that the girl's presence would interfere and distract from everything else. Estella suggested that he relax and have dinner together today. After all, it was not difficult to do. It's not everything, but it's worth doing. Her Majesty asked if he would like to go on a date with her. The guy never came on a date. He repeatedly heard proposals to this effect, but he certainly did not feel any pleasure from it. If it was all about going out to dinner, he wasn't against it. Ray Wen turned his attention to the two young knights who were talking nearby. They discussed seeing one of them. The guy replied that this time the date ended in a very hot night that both enjoyed. The Duke's son remembered what he had dreamed the previous night during the healing. He was afraid of this because this had never happened before. If he went on a date with Her Majesty, then the evening was bound to end in amorous pleasures. He was also frightened by the girl's further plans in this regard. But when she first found out that he was a virgin, she immediately asked him out. The girl was well aware of what was to follow after the meeting. And given the way this eccentric girl behaved, he definitely didn't want to go on a date with her. And his answer was obvious for such a case. He refused to meet his bride. Strangely enough, this did not happen. Ray Wen replied that he was not afraid of a date, but he had a lot of work to do tomorrow and he had no free time at all. And now he had to rest before further combat training, so they will see each other at dinner in the palace. The Duke's son was about to leave when the girl grabbed his shirt. He tried to break free, but his strength was too weak to repel the girl. The young man asked where the girl got such incredible strength, like a gorilla. Her Majesty joked. She said that to check if she was a gorilla, you should grab someone by the head and show your strength. The young man did not like the joke, and she said that she might understand everything. Estella seriously approached the issue. The girl asked if he really had a lot of work. He did not know how to answer. If he lies, then no one will spare him, and the relationship with the girl may deteriorate. And that's why he said that maybe he won't be so busy tomorrow. He could definitely find a free moment for her. The young man did not mind going on a date, but there was one point that should be fulfilled before they went on a date. They have to come home by 7 o'clock in the evening. The girl asked if there was actually a curfew in place, and was it really so strict and should be followed? The young man understood that if they arrived at this place before evening, then the princess would certainly not molest her. Estella agreed to the terms of her fiancé. However, she guessed about the main reasons for the boy's behavior. The girl extended her little finger to her lover. She asked to make a promise and keep the agreement regarding tomorrow's meeting. After all, believing all the gossip about the honesty of a raven, she did not want to make fools of him. The guy did not understand what the girl wanted from him. He was sure that she wanted him to cut his finger, and then he would be obliged to her in everything. But she reassured him that he would have to be killed only if he did not fulfill the agreement or promise. Ray Wen silently took Her Majesty's finger with his finger. So they swore to each other. However, if he dares to break his promise, then she will certainly take from him everything that he promised her before the meeting. Estella silently turned and went to her room. Part of her plan was implemented. It was funny how the great commander of a squad of soldiers and knights who fought monsters and monsters was afraid to go on a date with a girl. The girl was sure because the young man knew about the obligation to cut his finger every time the oath was broken. In such a case, even the smallest promise was very binding and weighed quite a lot for the person who made it. But this small promise of theirs meant a lot to both of them. The girl once again wanted to make sure that she was important to Raven and that he was not going to deceive her. And it could also indicate the possibility of betrayal on his part. Estella admitted to herself that she loved the boy so much, although it was very difficult to control myself. All the gossips and rumors every time tried to break the image that formed in her head about her boyfriend and future fiancé. Ray Wen and his assistant were sitting in his office. He was thinking about where to ask a girl out. There was an option to drive to the lake with beautiful scenery and swim by boat in the evening. It was supposed to be very romantic. Or you can go to a restaurant and go to the opera, a performance that was now very popular among the aristocrats of the city. It was supposed to impress his bride and also set her on a romantic path. Or you can just sit in a cafe. Asher, the commander of one of the squads of knights, knocked on the door. He reported that the third squad had just returned home. The results of the raid to the restricted area indicated that the guesses about the huge pool of miasma had come true. Monsters had the characteristic feature of appearing once every 2 to 3 years. They were all climbing out of puddles of miasma, and if the puddle in the forbidden zone is left open, monsters will climb out of it even more often. And the dimensions of the portal were also important. Recently, such a large puddle did not form. References to this phenomenon are dated about 60 years ago. It was then that there was a huge influx of monsters into the possession of people. Victims, and those who died at the cost of their lives, stopped the attack of the monsters. and the very appearance of such a puddle was supposed to be a harbinger of something terrible and irreparable. And the year was going to be very bad. And therefore, it is necessary to immediately take appropriate measures in order to stop a potential invasion of the Duke's possessions. Raven proposed to put a new barrier and thus prevent the attack of monsters. And it was also worth attacking first, in case the invasion had already begun. The commander of the third squad said that he was ready to carry out the captain's order. But the boy thought that he would definitely not be able to lead the squad tomorrow, because he had promised Estella to go on a date. He said that he is ready to deal with the monsters alone, without needing the help of an outsider. The soldiers in his squad asked if he had any plans for tomorrow. It seemed that they perfectly understood what was going to happen tomorrow. The smiles did not leave their faces. Raven had no choice but to admit that he was going on a date. The soldiers did not fully understand. Did their commander prefer seeing a girl to defeating monsters? This had not been observed before, but he was also interested in whether he knew how to behave on a date with a girl. The commander of the third squad promised that he could help with this. He had a very good guide on this subject. But Raven admitted to his associate that the gossip and rumors about him as a womanizer were exaggerated and quite false. In any case, the Duke's son promised to independently protect his father's possessions from the onslaught of monsters. And now he had his own affairs. All others were also free from duty for today. But don't forget to go to the doctor and get clean. Asher decided that he would still bring a manual for his commander. It was supposed to be very funny. After all, the commander was never seen on a date in the company of a girl or a woman. And this greatly interested the commander of the knights. Late at night, Raven came to a pool of miasma in the forbidden zone that intelligence had told him about. The knight decided to seal the puddle to prevent the monster from entering his possessions. He succeeded in this. But it is worth destroying the miasms. In order to completely destroy the pool of miasms, you need to ask Charlene's family for help. They are the ones who can clear the area of the presence of dark energies and monsters. A lot of red eyes appeared behind the boy and glared at him. But this did not scare him at all. Raven, on the contrary, activated his magical abilities and decided to organize an independent hunt for the monster that had managed to sneak into the land of people. He was thinking about dating at that time. The guy thought he should have had a good time. There was even the possibility of a first kiss. After all, he wanted this so much. He really wanted to do it with the princess. After all, Estella gave him peace with her beauty and attractiveness. He couldn't calm down when he thought about her. After a successful hunt, Raven returned to his room. He had a sickly look. Next to him was his assistant, Kate. She said that despite his efforts, he still does not have the grace and appearance that a healthy person should have. With his last strength, he tried to keep his face in the presence of other people. But how long he would be able to do this was a mystery to his assistant. And she didn't like that he decided to exert himself so much in order to show off. And besides, he had a date tomorrow. And it was better for him to stay alone and spend time relaxing from work. Ray Wen understood that Kate was right. It was worth postponing the date because the protection of people was more important than any formalities.